Hey everybody, it's Rothbard's Disciple here. I'm bringing you guys another video. Today we're going back to Bitcoin, and I really want to talk about Bitcoin today, especially because of all the things that have been happening with MetaNet and specifically with Money Button and one of the Bitcoin files companies or whatever, where they had illegal content posted, um, and it was being displayed. Now there were a bunch of rumors that there was child pornography being displayed. I don't know if this is particularly the case. Money Button didn't really say much about what exactly the illegal content was, and if you actually read the report that Ryan X. Charles released and that Money Button released, it's actually not good news for Bitcoin, specifically because when they talked about this, uh, all they said that they did was they deleted the user, or they revoked, or like they banned the user from using the platform. And if you think if you think about it, if it was child pornography, and I'm not even 100% sure that that's what it was, but those were the rumors. That's what people had been talking about on Twitter beforehand. If all you did was ban the user account, that's not good whatsoever. And there's a lot of really bad things that this implies. Um, but before we get to specifically why Bitcoin is bad for, or the way that they're building MetaNet is bad for, because it's basically a playground for child pornographers and people who want to um, give out copyrighted work. A lot of people don't understand the difficulties that law enforcement is going to have trying to go after people like this, because it's basically a completely anonymous way to distribute this type of stuff. There's no way to track people who do it. There's no way to stop people who do it. There's no way to even know if it's been done. There's 100 things bad about that. But before we get into the specifics of why the way that Craig Wright is trying to build MetaNet, and how it's just a terrible format, or a terrible design. I want to just go over some of the basics, okay? Because the whole thing I've been saying from the beginning of when Craig started talking about MetaNet, I've just been saying that it will not work, and there's no actual legitimate use cases for it. The reason why is because Bitcoin, it's not a computer, okay, guys? So when Craig would say this all the time for Ethereum, like, oh, Ethereum's trying to be a world computer, and that's stupid, and now Bitcoin's trying to be a world computer. And the only difference between what Craig Wright's trying to do with Bitcoin as a computer compared to Ethereum is Ethereum does their computation through their nodes, whereas with Bitcoin, he's just trying to do storage, right? The problem here, though, is that, like, if you're using Bitcoin or Ethereum as a computer, you just imagine a computer that requires 1,000 times the storage and computation of a normal computer, okay? Because again, the whole thing about Bitcoin is it's a distributed ledger, meaning that all the nodes do all the work. Okay, so if you're storing things or computing things on Bitcoin, it's 1,000 times less efficient. Okay, that's so fucking stupid. If you just look at that from a mathematical standpoint, like, oh hey, we invented this new computer, it's 1,000 times less efficient. Okay, but why? That's my question. Why would you invent a computer that's 1,000 times less efficient? Okay, and Bitcoin is not a computer. It's a shared public ledger. Okay, what that means, guys, so you can understand this, is that no one can deny its contents. All right, so as opposed to a ledger that Walmart or Netflix, or say Blizzard or Activision or whatever company it is that you want to talk about, the ledgers that they have are centralized, meaning they have direct access to their ledgers, and they can alter them. Okay, they can alter these ledgers, and so you don't know whether or not the ledger is truthful just by looking at it. Okay, the difference between Bitcoin and a ledger that, say, Netflix has, is that the Bitcoin ledger, no one can deny its contents. The contents are truthful. Whatever it is that the ledger says about Bitcoin, no one can go in there and alter it. Okay, that's the aspect that we really need to be pushing with Bitcoin, because that's the only thing that it does new. Okay, it's a shared public ledger, not a shared public computer. That the entire concept of that makes no sense, because again, you have 1,000 times more storage and computation costs. All right, now what this means is that centralized databases, they're exponentially more efficient. Again, like we talked about, they require trust, but the cost of storing things on centralized databases, it's pennies, pennies and nickels. Okay, a penny or a nickel with Bitcoin will get you a couple kilobytes. Okay, that's fucking retarded. Okay, pennies and nickels on centralized database will get you, you know, gigabytes. Okay, but we're talking about kilobytes here for Bitcoin. It's so stupid. And the other problem with Bitcoin is that not only is it all this extra storage and computation, but if you're putting all of this um, data, like the entire all of the world's data in raw format on Bitcoin. If you're doing that with centralized databases, you can do it with multiple different servers that are parallelized. And yeah, you can kind of parallelize Bitcoin, but if you're putting all the data on there, like all the nodes have to have all the data. If you're doing centralized databases, you would just split it up into many different parts, and those parts wouldn't have to enter, like they don't have to have all the data. Okay, so you could have, you know, 1/1000th of the data here, 1/1000th of the data there, and that really lowers the workload on each part of the database. Okay, so even if it's parallelized, um, it doesn't match centralized databases because centralized databases don't require every single node to have all of the data, but miners do. Okay, it makes absolutely no sense. But the whole thing is, and this is what I've been trying to push for the longest time, is that if you combine Bitcoin with centralized databases, you get the best of both worlds because you guarantee the integrity of the data, and there's no tangible increases in the costs of storage. Okay, so if you look at something like video games. A very popular game that recently came out is Black Ops 4, Call of Duty Black Ops 4. It's over 100 gigabytes right now, and if you go back to Craig Wright's video, the third MetaNet ICU, which has been pulled off of YouTube, um, it's not there anymore. You can still get some links other places. Yeah, it's supposed to be on Keyport. Keyport, as of the time of making this video, is down right now. But at 23 minutes in the third MetaNet ICU meeting, Craig says he expects transaction fees of about a quarter of a cent per transaction, and each transaction is about 250 bytes. So this comes out to a cost of $10 per megabyte. Okay, $10 per megabyte. Which is it's sort of like the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because again, if it's $10 per megabyte, that's $10,000 per gigabyte. So something like Call of Duty Black Ops 4 would cost $1 million to put on the blockchain. Now, this is just to put the original game on the blockchain. Like a couple of people have tried putting certain games on the blockchain already. Like if you actually go look at the games we have now, they're nothing like Call of Duty Black Ops 4. We've got some of the earliest games ever created. These games don't fit on your computer screen correctly. You know, they're just trash. Obviously, they work, but it's like going backwards in time, like 30 years. Not 30 years, but probably like 20 years. And it's like, hey, we created Bitcoin. You get to do all this new cool stuff on it, and then when the users use it, it's like going back in time 20 years. You shouldn't go back in time with new technology. You should be going forward in time. But again, going to Black Ops 4, it would cost them $1 million to put the game on chain to begin with, and then for every update they do, and if you don't know, updates on Call of Duty can be around 10 gigabytes. That means it's an extra $100,000 per update. Okay. Think about how stupid this is. Now, one of the things that a lot of people have been saying is, oh yeah, but once you put it on there, like when I made my video criticizing the idea of putting movies on the blockchain, people were like, well, don't you know that Netflix already has to pay shitloads of money to companies in order to stream the data to users? This is what you guys got to understand. When you put it on Bitcoin, you still have to pay companies to stream the data to users because, again, unless you're running a full node, you do not have the data on the blockchain stored on your computer locally, which means someone has to give you that data. Okay, so when people say, "Oh, there's efficiency gains because there's all these big companies that have to stream data to users," that those companies still have to do that same job, and it's not like you've lowered the size of the data that you're putting on the blockchain. It's the exact same amount of data. Okay, so there's no efficiency gains. There's just this massive initial cost to put things on the blockchain. Okay, but now here comes the real big problem: is that once you put it on blockchain, your IP rights are completely lost. Okay, so if you have it on the blockchain, your data in an unencrypted form, and we'll go over this in the next slide a little bit. But if you have your data on there in an unencrypted form, that means anybody can use that data. Okay. Um, so the entire idea of putting data on chain makes no sense. And again, people are going to say you can encrypt it. Yeah, you can, but again, what's the point of putting it on chain? And then people are going to say, oh, well, if you put it on chain, it can't be censored. But then we go back to the original problem that we were talking about of child pornography. So you're saying we can't censor child pornography? And then if you go back to what all the SV fanboys are saying about what we do with child pornography, they're saying we censor it. Okay, so if you're the whole point of putting raw data on chain as opposed to just putting hashes on chain is so that it's censorship proof, but you have to censor it because we can't allow things like child pornography or illegal content. Like what are you guys even talking about? It can't be censorship proof if you have to censor it. Okay, so the only benefit that people have talked about for putting raw data on chain, um, they're also arguing that we can't allow that benefit to occur because of things like child pornography, okay? Um, but again, if you combine Bitcoin with centralized databases and you use Bitcoin as an overlay, and what I mean by that is you just have a centralized database that holds all of the data, and then you use hashes, and again, you'll hash multiple things together so the hash can represent more than one piece of data. It could be multiple games at once. If you were using something like YouTube, YouTube has just free videos and then videos you can only watch if you pay for a subscription to YouTube, like they have YouTube TV. That could all be done with 2 tokens, okay? So, or actually with 1 token, because you don't need a token for people to use the free stuff on YouTube. It's just if they had paid for a subscription to YouTube, then you would send them a token, which again is a fraction of a cent, and then this allows them to watch all the other things that YouTube has to offer. And again, you would be guaranteeing the integrity of the data that they watch. They would know that, oh, hey, this is the legitimate video from YouTube. Um, and this would all be for a fraction of a cent. Okay, so there's basically no tangible increase in cost of storage if you combine Bitcoin with centralized databases, and instead of putting raw data on chain, you just hash that data, and you hash that data with contracts. And again, you'd have as many data pieces as that one contract covers. So this could be millions or billions of pieces of data all hashed into one hash token, and then that hash token it gives you permissions to view this data. Okay, and again, the other point that's really big here is you can ensure that intellectual property is not infringed while also allowing for the ease of the intellectual property transfer. And these are the HiveMind DAC applications that I've been talking about, where um, if you're working on a project and you're not a massive company and you want to work with other people, like one of the problems that artists or musicians have is they can't work with other artists or musicians because they'll steal their ideas. But if they were to put their ideas and hash it on a blockchain, then they can work with other artists and musicians. And if the other artists and musicians try to steal their ideas, they've got a record of it on the blockchain. Okay. So let's move to the second slide here, where we're going to be talking about how raw data storage leads to massive criminality. By storing any sort of unencrypted raw data on chain, you lose all your IP rights. Okay, so if you want to have control over your intellectual property, you can't give it away for free. Again, the blockchain is a public ledger, so anything you put on there, anyone else can view. So if you put any sort of raw data on chain, all your IP rights are out the window. Okay. So it makes no sense. Again, you can encrypt things and put them on the blockchain, but what's the real benefit for this? There's not a whole lot, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later. But if you're talking about unencrypted data, the only people who want to do this are criminals. And the other thing about encrypting data is, as soon as you can encrypt data, if someone encrypts child pornography, then that means nobody can ever know that the child pornography was put on chain, and so you can't actually go after these people unless they specifically send you the unencrypted child pornography. So it makes finding these people very hard once you start encrypting the raw data. So this is like encrypting raw data, like that's a great thing for child pornographers. It's a great thing for child pornographers. Okay. The other thing that we need to talk about is child pornography and stolen IP cannot be erased from the blockchain ever. Okay, when you prune something as a node, you don't delete it from the blockchain. It just means, hey, you're not gonna, like for this particular node that pruned this data, we're gonna pretend like it doesn't exist. Okay, this doesn't stop the data from existing, and there's no way to know whether a node has pruned that data or not. And you can even prune the data but still save the data. So you could have people like rogue node operators. Who save this child pornography, and for a fee they'll send it to you or whatever, you know what I mean? And the big problem with this is there's no data whatsoever on who runs a node. Okay, so you can't stop these nodes from distributing because there's no way to figure out who's operating that node. Okay, this isn't like addresses and stuff. Like when you run a node, like there's no identifying information on this node, okay? And again, you might say, oh, only miners run nodes. Well, if you're making a side, like yeah, that can be true, but the other thing you have to understand is anyone with access to the database for these miners could just download a block or certain transactions from these blockchains that has child pornography on it before anybody else knows about it, and then they've got that child pornography saved forever, okay? Saved forever, and then people can access it through the blockchain. And again, if you're accessing it through the blockchain, just getting sent transaction information, how is somebody going to figure this out, okay? There's no way to stop this. No way whatsoever. And the other problem here is like people are like, well, if someone's distributing child pornography, you just go to the site, figure out who it was, and then you throw them in prison forever. What makes you think that someone who's distributing child pornography is going to use a publicly accessible site to distribute this? Okay, they're going to go to some place like the dark web and they're going to be like, oh, hey, we'll send you the transaction information from our node if you pay us this Bitcoin to this address or whatever. And boom, voila, it's not done publicly, so there's no way to easily figure out who they are. Even if you get somebody who gets the data sent to them, you're just getting data sent to you from a random node, from a random IP address. How do you trace them? You can't. Okay, you literally can't trace them. And again, if you're encrypting the data, then nobody can look at the data on chain and be like, "Ooh, this was illegal." There's no way to stop it whatsoever. Going further, this raw data, even if it's encrypted or unencrypted, it offers nothing new. Okay, and we went back to this. The video games they're putting on it right now, you can't resize. Like it doesn't fit the screen when I go to this intergalactic, whatever the fuck this video game is. It doesn't fit my screen. I can't zoom in and out on it. Like it's absolutely terrible. Okay, and it's not like, oh hey, we're doing something new. It's like, oh hey, we're doing something that was done 20 years ago, and we're doing it worse than they did 20 years ago. Wow, great job, guys. Like, we totally went back in time. We made everything worse, and that's what you're trying to sell Bitcoin on? Like why would a corporation pay more for an inferior service? And again, we talked about this before. Even once they put the stuff on the blockchain, they still have to stream the data out to their users. So again, if you're talking about something like Netflix, where people were like, I think the name of the company was Akami or something. I don't remember the name of the company that streams stuff worldwide. They do like 1/3 of all data. It's a ridiculous amount. This one company, how much data they stream. But they're like, oh, I bet you didn't know about these guys. And it's like, yeah, I do. And the fact remains that even when you put things on the blockchain, you still need people to stream the data out for you. So you're having corporations pay more money to initially put their data on the blockchain, and they don't save any money on the streaming of that data side. Okay, so there's no benefit for it whatsoever. Now, instead of going backwards and offering technology that's been out there for 20 years and doing it worse than what it was done 20 years ago, you could do things like the blockchain-based hive mind DACs. Now, when you offer things like these blockchain-based hive minds, obviously they're not going to be great, but it's never been done before. Okay, so if you're doing something that's never been done before, when you have problems like with this video game that you're trying to play where it doesn't exactly fit the screen, like that's not a huge problem if you're doing something that has never been done in the world before. You know what I mean? It makes no sense to me why we're offering these inferior services that we've already had when there's things that we could be offering that have never been offered before. Because again, when you're offering things that have never been offered before, the customers don't really give a shit what it looks like because it's new, it's magical, it's something they've never experienced. Okay, trading and the other thing here with trading the with the hive mind DACs is that trading IP right now it's super dangerous to do. Like me as a writer, I don't want to really distribute my work amongst people because then they could try to steal it, and it's sort of hard for me to prove that I'm the original creator of this idea. And so that's why if you look at things like musicians or movie makers or publishers, there's a few gatekeepers in each one of these areas, and people trust these gatekeepers because they've got enough money at stake, enough of a reputation at stake, so that if they steal your IP, you can sue them. But when you're working with nobodies, like what exactly do you have to threaten them? You don't have anything to threaten them. Okay, there's nothing to threaten them at all. Okay, so you can't work with them. But again, if you put your data on a blockchain, just the hash of a data, this costs almost nothing to you, and then you can trade that IP, and then if they steal that IP from you, you've got a record on it, on a ledger that everybody knows that you could not have altered. Because again, I've got the data for all my stories, for all my merchandise. Um, it's all stored on my local computer, but people could ask the question, well, how do you know he's not lying? How do you know he didn't fabricate this evidence? And there's no way for me to really prove it. I could prove it with a blockchain, but you know, nobody's building these things, okay? Because again, with Bitcoin, one of the other advantages of this is if I try to work with nobodies right now, I can technically do it, but then I'm going to have all these files that I'm going to have to keep. Like if I want to give partial ownership of my project to, hundreds of different people that work on my project, like how am I going to keep this all in order? I'm going to have to hire people to do this for me, and it's going to cost me millions of dollars just to, keep my contracts in order. If I were to do this with Bitcoin, there's no messy files. It's just stuff done on the blockchain that you can have a computer analyze in a few seconds for a couple of cents. Okay, it's an absolutely exponential increase in efficiency if you're talking about Hivemind DACs, or you can do again Craig Wright's version of MetaNet, which there's no efficiency gains. In fact, it's way less efficient. There's massive costs to it that companies never had to pay for before, and again with no efficiency gains, so you're just paying a lot more, and you get an inferior service to what they already have. Okay. And what really bothers me with this is everything that we need for Hivemind DACs, it already exists, okay? We don't need anything new to be built on the blockchain. Yeah, there's a couple slight modifications that you could do to the applications that already exist, but everything that you need for a Hivemind DAC, it's things you build off-chain, and the vast majority of those things that you build off-chain are already 99% done because it's just things like YouTube or Netflix or Microsoft's OneDrive, and then you just add token systems to these things, okay? So it's just combining different things. Like we already have the puzzle pieces, we just got to put them together. And this really bothers me because the things for MetaNet, the way that Craig Wright's trying to build it, we don't have those things built yet, and so we're building entirely new systems when we've got this other way to build MetaNet that it makes a lot more sense. There's actual customers that need to use it. It allows you to build industries that never existed before, and it's way more efficient than the alternatives, but instead we're making every wrong turn that we can. So that leads you to the question, why are devs building these stupid things? Well, I think the main reason, honestly, is because Hivemind DACs require almost zero blockchain development, and developers think that, in order to be a cool blockchain developer or, a Bitcoin developer, they've got to be working on things directly on the blockchain because that's cool and that's hip. It's like, what if you were, if you're building a Hivemind DAC, then you would just be modifying things like YouTube or Microsoft's OneDrive, and that doesn't make people feel good, like when they're telling their parents or friends, like, what do you work on? And it's like, oh, I'm a Bitcoin developer, and they'd be like, oh, you work on blockchain, and they'd have to be like, no, technically speaking, I only work on, Microsoft's OneDrive, so I just add token systems to it, so it's not actually, it wouldn't be new stuff, and they want to just try and say that they're working on this cool new stuff. And again, when I say new stuff, I'm talking about in terms of the applications they're building. Okay, the applications they're building, what they have to learn new coding that most people don't understand. But again, the actual application from the user side rather than development side, it's not new at all. So they're building old applications from the user perspective, but new applications from the developer's perspective, and that's why they think it's cool and hip, and that's why they don't pay attention to it. The other problem is the current users. This is a big problem that happens within a lot of popular video games. One of the biggest ones that they're experiencing a massive problem with this right now is World of Warcraft. You have the people who play the game of World of Warcraft who aren't like serious players, and they ask for all these different things to be added into the game that actually make the game worse, and they make the serious players quit out. The same thing happens with Bitcoin. We've got all these idiots within Bitcoin that ask for the stupid ass shit, and yeah, they're the majority of the people within Bitcoin, but they don't matter, okay? And they're asking for these frivolous apps because they don't actually need the blockchain. They don't actually use the blockchain. It's the same thing in World of Warcraft. You got all these idiots in World of Warcraft, and just so you guys know, I don't play it that I don't like. I've played World of Warcraft for like 2 hours in my life, so I would have been one of these idiots asking for this new stuff who didn't know what they were talking about. But when you build new apps, it's not for the idiots who don't actually use the blockchain. It's for the people who actually have a need for it. And when it comes to blockchain technology, I told you guys about this a long time ago. 4 years ago, I started writing a story with the express intent to put it on the blockchain. I have years of my life invested in building projects that I need blockchain applications in order to finish. And nobody's listening to me as an actual customer who needs these things. And instead, they're listening to users who they bought Bitcoin on an exchange once and now they think they're important and they matter. They don't. These people who are just holding, they don't fucking matter. I have years of my life invested in projects that I need these applications for, and nobody's looking at me like they're like, I don't know. It's really stupid. I come in. It's like coming into a buffet, right? And it's almost like I come into this buffet and I see this roast beef in this one table, or this one buffet table, and I see buns on another table, and I'm like, oh hey, I would really like to have a roast beef sandwich. And they're like, no, we don't do that. And it's like, but you've got all the parts right here. You just got to put them together. And they're like, no, we don't make them like that. That's not the way we do it. And it's like, but it's a fucking buffet. Don't I get to have whatever I want? They're like, no, if you try to do that, we'll kick you out. And that's basically been my experience within Bitcoin SV. It's just like, hey, like you guys already have all the things built that I need. You just have to put them together. And they're like, no, all the other customers or all the other people here, they don't want that. And it's like, well, again, if we're going from this buffet example, it's like there are these customers who are standing outside the restaurant who don't actually come in to eat, and it's like, well, they don't actually use this place. You know what I mean? It's like instead of building things or making your buffet for non-customers, maybe you should make it for the actual customers. But they don't. Okay, they actually don't. So what the developers need to do is you got to quit listening to your current user base. They're a bunch of fucking idiots who don't use the blockchain. And if you think they do use the blockchain, look at your transaction count, you dumb motherfuckers. It's still low as fuck. Okay, even when we have all this new stuff, this new frivolous stuff, we've barely seen a jump in transaction count. Okay, so quit pretending these actual customers, or the last point too is quit pretending these actual customers are going to circle jerk for you. Okay, customers are assholes. If you've ever worked in customer support, people are not nice. People who use the the whatever product or service it is, when they come in and they tell you there's something wrong with it, they're not nice about it. People who are nice to you are people who don't use the product, okay? And so, like, I've been fucking censored and banned off absolutely every platform by all these major developers for not being nice. And it's like, why would I be nice? I have 4 years of my life in these projects, okay? 4 years of my life. And the only reason I got involved into making YouTube videos on this stuff was because, whatever it was, a year and a half ago when Bitcoin Cash split, they still hadn't built any of the applications that I needed. And during the split, I was like, well, maybe it's just those Bitcoin BTC people who are idiots that have been holding us back. And then during the Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV split, I was like, well, maybe it's just the Bitcoin Cash people who are idiots who are holding us back. And the problem is that it's everyone who's a fucking idiot. Because again, even if you assume Craig Wright's version of MetaNet is the way to go, we have dozens of developers working on that, okay? And there's a thousand ways to skin a cat, but we're only trying to skin a cat one way. And again, I'm a fucking customer. I don't want you guys to build this so I can say, ha, look at that, that's cool, somebody else should use it. I need it myself. Okay, you have all these people cheerleading you on, like, hey, let's put raw data storage on the blockchain. Do they have any data that they're actually going to store on the blockchain in raw format? No. So why are you building for them? I have data I want to store on the blockchain, but no fucking way in hell am I putting it on in raw form. Okay, that makes no fucking sense, especially for me as a writer, because again, if I was to put all my writing on the blockchain, it's a couple hundred megabytes. I could look up how much it is for you. It's a lot of fucking writing. There's a lot of images in there as well. It's a fuckload. Um, but it was cost me, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to do. And then every time I make an edit, and as a writer, when I write my scripts, I edit those things like, I'm on my like fifth major edit of the storyline for the story I'm doing. Um, and I'm probably gonna have to do like 8 or so before it's close to finished. And with each edit that I would do, I would have to re-upload it onto the blockchain. It makes no fucking sense. So quit circle jerking for these idiots who don't actually use the blockchain. Okay, start building for customers. And the final point that I want to make before I wrap this up, because I've already been going on and ranting on this for a while, is decentralization is not the goal. Use is the goal. Craig likes to say this a lot, but he does not. Craig never practices what he preaches. Okay, why are we trying to build decentralized storage? Okay, It makes no sense, okay? It's a meaningless thing, it's expensive, and it's incredibly dangerous. How do you stop things like child pornography or illegal content from being on decentralized storage systems? Who's responsible for this, okay? Who's responsible? There's no real way to stop it. There's no real way to figure out who's responsible, especially when they're as anonymous as Bitcoin is. Especially if you're putting raw data onto a decentralized ledger like Bitcoin, because then you would have like an unbelievable amount of data going on to the blockchain. It would be impossible for the authorities to try and hash the data going on to see if it's, child pornography or things like that. Like it would be literally impossible. Okay, if you're doing things like hashes, then if people try and put raw child pornography on the blockchain, it would be immediately apparent because nobody would be putting raw data on the blockchain except the people trying to put child pornography on there. Okay, nobody would be putting raw data on the blockchain. And I had one person try to comment to me and say like, "Oh yeah, but how would police stop people from spamming like memes at them in order like how would they know the difference between memes and child pornography?" Remember, guys, it's $10 per megabyte to put things on the blockchain according to the transaction fees that Craig Wright wants. Okay, so do you really think that somebody's going to pay $10 to put a 1 megabyte meme on the internet, and they would have to put on thousands, not only thousands, they'd have to put on millions of these memes in order to try and get child pornography by? Because again, guys, it's a computer. Like if you have the federal agents looking at the blockchain for child pornography, they're not going to be actually looking at it like with humans. It's going to be fucking computers doing this. Computers can go through millions of files a day. They can't go through billions of, you know, they can't go through billions of raw data files, but if they're just going through, these small size files, because again, in my version of MetaNet, you're only putting hashes on there. That means that there's almost no data being put on there in raw format, so it's very easy for them to look through that. But again, if we're going back to Craig Wright's version of MetaNet, where he's like, oh, we're going to have billions of transactions a day, imagine if, a quarter of those are at least 20 megabytes or bigger, and then try hashing all those, and then think about the resources that police forces or whoever it is that catches child pornographers would have to go through to hash out all this data to see whether or not it's child pornography. There's no fucking way, guys. There's no fucking way. It's literally impossible to stop child pornography on Craig Wright's version of the raw data metanet. It's so stupid. And this is what you guys are cheerleading for. It's like, oh, hey, we could be, instead of instead of building all this stuff for child pornographers, we could be building apps for those who are unlawfully censored for new industries like the hive mind DACs. But the SV developers are like, no, fuck that. Let's build shit for child pornographers. Yeah. Like, you guys are such fucking idiots. Such fucking idiots. Now, again, the whole point when you're using Bitcoin or anything like this, and this is the real reason why Craig's version of MetaNet doesn't work, is that efficiency is key. Okay, even when you're talking about using the hash format, if you have low value data like tweets, you still got to remember about the efficiency. So low value data you can always concatenate together before hashing it. This is why you never do raw data. This is why things like oh, what is it? Memo's the worst fucking application I've ever seen in my life, and people still cheerlead it. Even on Bitcoin Cash side, Bitcoin SV, they're all cheerleading it, and you're all a bunch of fucking idiots. Um, there's no point to it, okay? Decentralized storage, even at like Bitcoin Cash isn't building MetaNet, so they're pushing the interplanetary file system. That's fucking retarded. Okay, you use Bitcoin as an overlay system to centralize storage. Okay, so then you get the best of both worlds. If the centralized storage system isn't doing its job, then it's shown through the hashes on the blockchain, and so you know for a fact that they're fucking up. Okay, so it gives you the best of both worlds while you still get the efficiency of centralized storage and you get the decentralization of the public ledger. Okay, but the final point I want to leave this on with you guys, or the final point I want to leave you guys with is just that Bitcoin's cost to users for any application can and should be basically zero. If you're not doing it this way, you're doing it wrong. This is one of the arguments that I had with the Bitcoin Cash developers during the split. Is I said, look, if you have a transaction whose cost is over, like 1 or 2 cents, you formatted it wrong and you're a fucking idiot. Same applies today. Same applies today. I've been saying the goddamn same thing for years, and nobody fucking listens. And here we are now, where we have child pornographers using Bitcoin SV. We can't find them, we can't stop them, and they put child pornography on the Bitcoin blockchain forever, so that if anyone wants to fire up a node and start distributing that data through Bitcoin, they can, and there's no way to stop them. It's the stupidest shit ever. And why did we do it? Because Craig Wright said so, okay? Because Craig Wright said so. It's not because we actually have any business use for this stuff. It's just because Craig Wright said so, and you're all too fucking stupid to try and do things your own goddamn way. Welcome to the world of Bitcoin, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video more than I, didn't enjoy making it. There'll be more videos coming out soon.